A biker humiliates a black boy, thinking no one can stop him. But when he discovers the boy's father is the chief of police, everything changes, and what happens next will leave you speechless. Don't miss this jaw-dropping moment of justice. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of May's Diner, a small-town eatery nestled along a lonely stretch of highway. The place had a rustic charm, with red vinyl booths and faded photographs of the town's past lining the walls. The scent of sizzling burgers and fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the faint hum of an old jukebox playing a country tune. But despite the cozy atmosphere, Malik Carter sat tensely at a booth near the window, his hands wrapped around a half-melted chocolate milkshake. 14 years old, Malik was slim but athletic, his deep brown skin contrasting against his neatly pressed school uniform. His sneakers tapped anxiously against the floor as he peered out the window, searching for his father's patrol car. His father, Chief Desmond Carter, was known for his strictness, his discipline, and his unshakable moral code, qualities that often made Malik feel both proud and pressured to never step out of line. The sudden roar of engines shattered the diner's relative calm. A group of bikers rumbled into the parking lot, their motorcycles snarling like wild beasts marking their territory. The leader, Rex Viper Malone, swung his leg over his Harley and stomped toward the entrance, his heavy boots thudding against the pavement. Viper was a brute of a man, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard peppered with grey. A skull-patterned bandana covered his head, and his arms, heavily tattooed with flames and grim reapers, flexed as he pushed open the diner's glass door with unnecessary force. The gang followed close behind, filling the small establishment with a loud, swaggering presence. Conversations died down. The waitress, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, hesitated before forcing a smile. "Usual, boys?" she asked warily. Viper ignored her, his sharp gaze sweeping over the room until it landed on Malik. A slow, amused sneer curled across his lips. "Well, well, what do we have here?" he drawled, making his way to Malik's booth. Malik stiffened. He had seen men like Viper before, the kind who commanded attention through fear, who relished in the discomfort they caused. Still, he kept his face neutral as the biker loomed over him. "Kids these days," Viper mused, shaking his head. "Sitting in diners, drinking milkshakes, acting like they own the place. No respect." Malik swallowed hard. He knew better than to take the bait, but silence felt like submission. "I'm just waiting for my dad," he said, keeping his voice steady. Viper let out a low chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "Your dad, huh? Let me guess. Ain't got the guts to handle himself, so he sends his little boy here to do the waiting for him." The bikers laughed. Malik's grip on his milkshake tightened, but he willed himself to stay calm. Viper suddenly snatched the milkshake from Malik's hands and tilted it, letting the thick liquid spill onto the table in a slow, deliberate stream. The cold mess seeped toward Malik's lap, but he barely flinched, his jaw clenched tight. "Oops," Viper said mockingly. "Look at that mess. You should clean that up, boy." Malik's stomach churned, but he didn't move. He refused to be reduced to their entertainment. "I said, clean it up." Viper's voice had an edge now, the playful malice sharpening into something more dangerous. The gang cackled, enjoying the spectacle. Malik met Viper's gaze and shook his head. "No." A hush fell over the diner. Even the waitress, who had been pretending not to notice, froze mid-step. Viper's face darkened. He leaned in closer, his breath hot and reeking of stale beer. "What do you just say to me?" Malik refused to look away. "I said no." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in one swift motion, Viper grabbed Malik's backpack from the seat beside him and tossed it to the floor. Before Malik could react, Viper stepped on it, grinding his boot down with cruel amusement. "That's what happens when you don't listen, boy," he sneered. "Now pick it up." Malik's fists curled so tight his nails dug into his palms. The bikers were howling with laughter now, their amusement filling the small diner like a toxic cloud. The waitress looked away, the other customers frozen in their seats. No one dared to intervene. Just as Viper leaned in, ready to deliver another demeaning comment, a sharp sound cut through the tension, the unmistakable roar of a police cruiser pulling up outside. The gang's laughter died instantly. Viper straightened slightly, his cocky demeanor flickering with unease. Malik didn't need to turn around to know who had arrived. A figure stepped out of the police car, his boots hitting the pavement with practiced authority. The diner's glass door swung open, and in walked Chief Desmond Carter. The room held its breath, and for the first time that evening, Viper Malone looked like he had made a very big mistake. Chief Carter entered in full uniform, radiating authority. His eyes locked onto Malik, then onto Rex. The entire room held its breath. Rex, unaware of who he was dealing with, smirked and made a dismissive remark about officers not being what they used to be. Chief Carter calmly but firmly asked Malik what happened. Malik, still shaking, explained. The waitress nervously confirmed the story, and the bikers laughed it off. Chief Carter stepped closer to Rex, lowering his voice in that deadly, commanding way only a cop can. He told Rex he was making a big mistake. Rex, still playing tough, scoffed. "Yeah? And what are you gonna do about it?" Several squad cars pulled up outside, and officers stepped in. The bikers' bravado started to fade. Chief Carter informed Rex that this was not just an incident, it was assault, harassment, and destruction of property. The waitress, emboldened, stepped forward and said she would testify. Other patrons murmured in agreement. Rex suddenly realized how serious this was. His gang members shifted uncomfortably, sensing things were about to go very, very wrong. Just when Rex thought he might be able to talk his way out of it, Chief Carter smirked and dropped the final blow. "Funny thing, Rex. Didn't you skip out on your parole check-in last week?" Rex's face drained of color. Chief Carter informed him that not only was he under arrest for what he did to Malik, but his parole violation meant he was going straight back to prison. Growing up as the son of a black police chief in a predominantly white town, Malik Carter has always been aware of the unspoken rules he has to follow. His father, Chief Desmond Carter, raised him with the belief that strength isn't just about standing tall, it's about knowing when and how to fight. But that lesson has never been easy for Malik to accept. At school, he's often the only black kid in his class, navigating a world where he has to prove himself twice as much just to be treated fairly. Some kids admire his father, while others whisper about him behind Malik's back. A black cop. Bet he's just trying to impress white folks. Malik pretends not to hear, but the words stick with him. At home, he watches his father deal with the daily pressures of running the police department, constant scrutiny, silent resentment, and the occasional outright threat. Malik knows his father believes in justice, but he also knows that the badge doesn't always protect you when you're black. He dreams of following in his father's footsteps, but deep down he wonders, is it worth it? Is being a black officer in America really making a difference, or is it just putting a target on your back? Rex Viper Malone wasn't always just a thug terrorizing diners. Years ago, he was part of an outlaw biker gang that ran drugs, extorted small businesses, and clashed with the law every chance they got. He lived for the chaos, for the thrill of knowing no one could control him. But everything changed the night his brother, Dwayne, was shot and killed in a police raid. The way Rex tells it, the cops didn't give Dwayne a chance. Executed him like a damn animal, he would spit whenever the topic came up. What he conveniently leaves out is that Dwayne was armed, had fired first, and was wanted for multiple felonies. To Rex, those details don't matter. What matters is that his brother is dead, and the cops pulled the trigger, and the worst part. The officer in charge of the raid? A black man. Since that night, Rex's hatred has festered. He doesn't just hate cops, he hates black authority figures, To him, they are traitors, imposters, people who don't belong in positions of power. When he saw Malik sitting alone in that diner, all of that rage boiled up. He didn't just see a kid. He saw a symbol of everything he despised. Humiliating Malik wasn't just about making himself feel big. It was about reminding the boy of his place. Chief Desmond Carter has never been the kind of man to back down. In his 20 years on the force, he's built a reputation as a leader who demands discipline, commands respect, and takes no nonsense from anyone. He's faced racism within his own department, the side eyes from officers who resent taking orders from a black man. He's been threatened by white supremacist groups, received anonymous letters warning him to step down, but he never flinched. He runs his police force by the book. No corruption, no brutality, no exceptions. It's made him enemies on both sides. Some white officers see him as a problem, a man who won't play along with their unspoken rules. Some black residents see him as a sellout, a man wearing a badge for a system that has oppressed his own people. But Carter doesn't care about their opinions. He cares about justice, and he's passed that lesson down to Malik. He has told his son time and time again, strength isn't just about how hard you hit. It's about how well you take a hit and still stand. But now, standing in that diner, looking at his son with milkshake spilled across the table and his backpack under a racist's boot, Chief Carter knows. This time, justice won't come in the form of words. The diner was dead silent as Chief Desmond Carter stepped through the glass doors. The golden evening light glinted off the polished badge on his chest, the gleam of his holstered gun stark against his dark uniform. He was a man who carried authority like a second skin, and everyone in that room knew it. His eyes locked onto Malik first. His son, sitting stiffly, chocolate milkshake still dripping onto the table, backpack crumpled under Rex Viper Malone's heavy boot. Then his gaze shifted to Rex. Cold, calculated, unflinching. The air was thick with tension. The bikers, moments ago howling with laughter, now watched in uneasy silence. The waitress, frozen mid-step, clutched her notepad as if it were a lifeline. And Rex. He smirked. Damn shame what's happened to officers these days, he drawled, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of Carter's presence. Used to be a time when real men wore the badge. A couple of the bikers chuckled, nervous, forced. Chief Carter didn't move, didn't flinch. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, too calm. Malik, what happened? Malik sat up a little straighter, trying to steady his breathing. He took my milkshake, poured it out, told me to clean it up. His voice wavered, but he pushed forward. I said no. Then he threw my backpack on the ground and stepped on it. Carter gave a slight nod, processing. Then he turned his head slightly. That true? The waitress hesitated, then swallowed hard. Yes, sir, it's true. Man, come on now, one of the bikers scoffed, trying to shake off the weight in the air. It's just a little roughhousing. Viper grinned, leaning back slightly. Yeah, lighten up, Chief. Just having a little fun with the boy. Chief Carter took a slow, measured step forward. The laughter died completely. Carter's voice dropped, low, firm, the kind of tone that could freeze a man in place. You're making a big mistake, Malone. Rex tilted his head, that cocky smirk still in place. That right? And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it? The words had barely left his mouth before the distant howl of sirens cut through the evening air. Every biker's head snapped toward the diner windows just in time to see 3 squad cars rolling into the parking lot. Doors swung open. Officers stepped out. The shift in the room was immediate. The gang's bravado cracked like cheap glass. The men who had moments ago been laughing and jeering were suddenly dead silent. Rex's smirk faltered, just for a second. Carter took another step forward. Now they were nearly chest to chest. Here's what I'm going to do about it, Carter said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of a hammer. You assaulted my son, harassed him, destroyed his property, and now you're going to answer for it." Rex scoffed, but it wasn't as confident as before. "You serious? Over a damn milkshake?" "No," Carter said smoothly. "Over you thinking you can put your hands on my son and walk away." The waitress, emboldened by the officers now standing at the entrance, cleared her throat. "I'll testify." One of the other customers, a man in his 60s who had been silent this whole time, nodded. "Me too." A couple more murmured in agreement. Rex shifted on his feet, his cockiness draining by the second. His gang members weren't backing him up, not this time. Carter took out his radio. "This is Chief Carter. I need one in custody for assault and harassment." One of the younger bikers, Trey, muttered, "Man, let's just get out of here." But it was too late. Rex exhaled sharply, running a hand through his beard as if trying to piece together an escape route. He lifted his hands, palms out. "Look, Chief, let's not make a scene here. Maybe I step outside, we talk man to man, and we just—" Carter smirked. "Funny thing, Rex. Didn't you skip out on your parole check-in last week?" Silence. Rex's face drained of color. Carter tilted his head, relishing the sudden shift in power. "That's a violation, isn't it?" The officers behind him were already moving. "You're under arrest," Carter said smoothly, as the officers grabbed Rex's arms and twisted them behind his back. Rex snarled, trying to jerk away. "You can't do this." Carter leaned in, just enough for only Rex to hear. "You had power over a kid for 5 minutes. I have power over you for years." The cuffs clicked shut. And just like that, the reign of Rex Viper Malone was over. The silence in the diner was thick as the officers secured the handcuffs around Rex's wrists. The once boisterous gang stood in stunned stillness, their leader now reduced to nothing more than another criminal being taken away. And then Trey spoke. "Look, man, I didn't sign up for this." His voice wasn't loud, but in the tension-filled diner, it may as well have been a gunshot. Heads turned. The young biker, no older than his mid-20s, took a hesitant step back from the group. His eyes flickered between Rex, now seething with rage, and Chief Carter, who simply watched with the quiet intensity of a man who had seen this all before. Rex sneered. "You growing soft on me, Trey?" His voice was laced with venom, but it was the kind of venom that came from a man who knew he was losing. Trey shook his head, jaw tightening. "Nah, I just know when something ain't right." He looked at Malik then, his face betraying something close to guilt. "And this? This ain't right." One by one, the other bikers shifted. Some exchanged glances, a few shuffled toward the door. No one wanted to be next on Carter's radar. The power Rex once commanded, the blind loyalty he had wielded like a weapon, was crumbling before his eyes. "You cowards!" Rex spat, his voice straining as the officers tightened their grip on his arms. "After everything I've done for you, you're just gonna walk." One biker snorted. "Done for us, or done to us?" Trey didn't wait for a response. He turned, walking toward the door. Malik sat motionless, watching the scene unfold. His heart pounded, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was something else. He wasn't just seeing a racist bully get what he deserved. He was seeing the power of justice, the way his father had always described it. His father had never been about brute force, never about vengeance. He didn't need to throw a punch to bring a man to his knees. Malik exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing. This was justice, and it was far more powerful than anything Rex could have imagined. As Trey reached the door, he hesitated. Then he turned back to Malik. For a second, he seemed unsure of what to say. He scratched the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. Then, finally, he spoke. "Sorry, kid." His voice was quiet, but genuine. "That wasn't right." Malik met his gaze, surprised. Trey swallowed hard, then gave a small nod before pushing the door open and stepping out into the night. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof that even in the unlikeliest places, change was possible. The metal of the handcuffs bit into Rex's wrists as the officers guided him toward the exit. His once cocky demeanor had been stripped away, leaving behind a man desperate to cling to whatever power he thought he still had. As they passed Malik, Rex twisted violently, trying to break free. The officers tightened their grip, but his voice, full of venom and desperation, cut through the diner like a whip. "This ain't over, boy. You think this changes anything?" he snarled, his face red with rage. "You think this means you win?" His wild eyes locked onto Malik, then shifted to Chief Carter. "You and your badge don't mean nothing to me. You're just another—" Slam. Before he could finish, an officer shoved him against the hood of a squad car, pinning him down. Chief Carter stepped forward, his shadow stretching over Rex. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He simply looked down at him, his voice steady and unshaken. "You had power over a kid for 5 minutes," he said, his tone cold. "I have power over you for years." Rex stopped struggling. His breathing was heavy, his chest rising and falling as the weight of reality crashed down on him. He had lost. Completely. The officers pulled open the squad car door and shoved him inside. The door slammed shut. Rex Viper Malone was done. For a long moment, the diner remained eerily still. The silence, once filled with fear and hesitation, was now something else entirely. Awareness. Then, the murmur started. Quiet whispers, uneasy glances, shuffling feet. The waitress, who had spent years pretending not to see things like this, pressed a hand to her chest, exhaling slowly. The older man in the corner, who had once accepted the way things were, nodded to Chief Carter as he passed. And Malik. He looked around and saw something shift. Some customers looked ashamed. Some looked impressed. But all of them had witnessed a change. By the time the squad car pulled away, taking Rex toward a fate he could no longer control, the word was already spreading. A biker had messed with the wrong black kid. And now, he was paying the price. For a long moment, the diner remained eerily still. The silence, once filled with fear and hesitation, was now something else entirely. Awareness. Then the murmur started. Quiet whispers, uneasy glances, shuffling feet. The waitress, who had spent years pretending not to see things like this, pressed a hand to her chest, exhaling slowly. The older man in the corner, who had once accepted the way things were, nodded to Chief Carter as he passed. And Malik. He looked around and saw something shift. Some customers looked ashamed, some looked impressed, but all of them had witnessed a change. By the time the squad car pulled away, taking Rex toward a fate he could no longer control, the word was already spreading. A biker had messed with the wrong black kid, and now he was paying the price. For a long moment, the diner remained eerily still. The silence, once filled with fear and hesitation, was now something else entirely. Awareness. Then the murmur started. Quiet whispers, uneasy glances, shuffling feet. The waitress, who had spent years pretending not to see things like this, pressed a hand to her chest, exhaling slowly. The older man in the corner, who had once accepted the way things were, nodded to Chief Carter as he passed. And Malik. He looked around and saw something shift. Some customers looked ashamed. Some looked impressed. But all of them had witnessed a change. By the time the squad car pulled away, taking Rex toward a fate he could no longer control, the word was already spreading. A biker had messed with the wrong black kid. And now, he was paying the price. For a long moment, the diner remained eerily still. The silence, once filled with fear and hesitation, was now something else entirely. Awareness. Then, the murmur started. Quiet whispers, uneasy glances, shuffling feet. The waitress, who had spent years pretending not to see things like this, pressed a hand to her chest, exhaling slowly. The older man in the corner, who had once accepted the way things were, nodded to Chief Carter as he passed. And Malik? He looked around and saw something shift. Some customers looked ashamed, some looked impressed. But all of them had witnessed a change. By the time the squad car pulled away, taking Rex toward a fate he could no longer control, the word was already spreading. A biker had messed with the wrong black kid. And now, he was paying the price.